All right, so let's get started. Welcome. This is my second cybersecurity project, um, and let's get into it. So, in our second project, we are enumerating and exploiting vulnerabilities for our client, which I have called Client X. So we've been approached by Client X after they've added a new system called the production server. They've expressed some worry about the security of their new system, and they're requesting that we test the system for those for vulnerabilities. In addition, Client X would like us to also test their established web server system for vulnerabilities as well. We're going to enumerate and display the vulnerabilities both on the production and web servers. We're going to exploit two of the found vulnerabilities on either server to show a lack of security. We are going to take one of the exploits in each pair of exploits and show that we have gained root access to that server. We will also use the root access gained from those exploits to share examples of sensitive information that's been exposed on those servers. And we will be creating a backdoor account with root privileges on both servers. We will be operating from the Kali Linux trusted within the client's network and using commands in the terminal through Kali to enumerate those vulnerabilities. For any vulnerabilities we find with CVE numbers, those numbers will be listed, as well as we will display their CVSS scores to share their severity. Vulnerabilities we have found without CVEs may also be displayed. We will test these vulnerabilities by trying to exploit them in an MSF console through the terminal, and we'll share if we are able to find anything interesting or sensitive exposed on the servers. After this, we are going to offer our recommendations based on what we're able to find and exploit. So here we're just showing off the image of the system map as it is currently. You can see it is identical to our previous system map, although there is the added production server over on the trusted network. So next, we're going to show the vulnerabilities we found on the newly added production server. We'll enumerate those vulnerabilities using the nmap command as well as the nmapped -- script vuln command. We will include documentation of the names, CVE numbers, and CVSS scores where applicable. All right, so here we're using nmap of the trusted network as a whole to help us identify the target since we were unfamiliar with the IP address. Right here we've identified our target production server has the IP of 192.168.0.18. And our operating system that we are on is the Kali Trusted, which we were already aware of the IP address there. All right. So here is our first vulnerability we found, VSFTPD version 2.3.4 backdoor. The CVE number you can see here, as well as the CVSS score. We have verified as being 10, and it's very high. This is through the open port 21. Here's our next vulnerability found. It is a MySQL vulnerability. Here we've displayed the CVE number as well as the CVE score of 5.1. You can see that this is the open port for the MySQL 3306. Our third vulnerability is called SSL Poodle. Here you can see the CVE number, and then we have found that it has a CVSS score of about 4.3. It is about medium security. It is found on port 5432. Right. Our fourth found vulnerability is the slow Loris DOS attack. We have our CVE number. It also has a CVSS score of 5. It is about medium severity. This is found on port 80. This is going to be one of the vulnerabilities we're going to try to exploit later. And fifth vulnerability we found is the RMI registry. This was one we were unable to find the CVE for, but it is on port 1099. This is also one we would like to try exploiting later. All right, so here we are going to try to exploit those last two vulnerabilities, number 4 and 5. We'll also show after we try exploiting them a successful backdoor account created with root access to exploit the production server. My little window. All right, so now that you get a good view of the whole image, this is the slow Loris DOS attack exploit. Here we entered the MSF console, and using the search command functions, we identified an exploit for the attack. Using that exploit, we have made sure to check the options and make sure to set our R hosts to our target system IP, which is the IP address of the production server. After verifying that, we have run the exploit. And as you can see down near the bottom of the image, after the run command, there is a successful DOS attack in action that will keep sending the keep alive headers every 15 seconds, as shown in the options, until it is exited. This did not, however, give us access to the root privileges, so we are going to try another vulnerability. All right, with this one, let me get that to go away. Sorry. All right, here we are testing the fifth vulnerability we found, the RMI registry. This was one, if you remember, we did not find a CVE for, but I found it very interesting, so I wanted to see if it was exploitable. In the image here, you can see that we had already identified what exploit we wanted to use in our MSF console using the search command. So in the image, it starts with us setting the R hosts to the target production server. We then verify our options here in the picture, showing that it is set correctly. And then we run the exploit and make a successful connection with root access to the production server. We show that we have the root access by using the sysinfo command in the Meterpreter console that the successful connection presented us with. You can see that in the image, it's down at the bottom left, that we have the Meterpreter console opened up. We run sysinfo, and it shows the computer we're using is Metasploitable. We have included in the image proof that the Metasploitable is the name of the production computer, and that we have successfully gained access to the root using the command over in the Meterpreter console, get UID, and it shows us that our server username is root. So we have gained root access. All right, and using that RMI registry exploit, we are still in the Meterpreter console. We will run the shell command in this console and establish a shell we can operate on there. In the shell, we'll establish a new user that has root privileges using the command user add -ou 0 -g 0, and then we will set a username. We have used test user 1. Then using password test user one command, we will establish a simple password of one. We retype that password and it shows we are updated successfully. We will then, as you see in the image, go to the production server virtual machine and use that test user one to successfully log in. And then we ask it, who am I? Even though it already shows us we are root at Metasploitable, in the commands line, we ask it who we are and it shows we are root. So we have gained root access with our backdoor account here. Going back to the shell opened in the interpreter console on our Kali Linux machine, um, under the RMI registry exploit, we're going to explore some of the files we're able to access. The left-hand image here shows some very sensitive information that's being exposed from the production server. At the very bottom of that process, it is a document called Safe Combinations. That is under some folders in the MSF admin user or MSF admin folder under stuff. And when we open and display that file, you see we have at least 3 safe combinations, which is some highly sensitive information being exposed here. The right side image is not very sensitive information. It's just a recipe, but it still displays that we can gain access to a user's files, and which could potentially be sensitive information. All right, moving on. We are now going to show vulnerabilities that we found on their web server. Enumerating the vulnerabilities found on the web server, again, we will use nmap and nmap script vuln commands. We will document the CVE numbers, the CVSS scores where applicable. Note here that 3 of the 4 we're enumerating with CVE numbers are ones we had also found on the production server, which is not uncommon. You can see using nmap of our web server, very similar to the nmap run with our production server, you can see that all of the ports are open on this server as well. All right, number 1, the VSFTPD version 2.3.4 backdoor again pops up on the web server as well. We are actually going to use this vulnerability to exploit this server later, which we did not do on our production server. Number 2, we have the SSL/TLS MITM vulnerability, or CSS injection, that is also known as. The CVE number you can see here. It has a CVSS score of 5.8. It is medium, verging on high vulnerability, and it is at port 5432. Here you see again, we've also been able to find the SSL poodle vulnerability on the web server as well. The CVE number is displayed. Vulnerability score remains the same as it was on the production server. It is on port 5432. Again, we have been able to identify the vulnerability of the slow loris DOS attack on this system as well. Here we display the CVE number and the score again. The 5th vulnerability we found is one the second vulnerability we'd like to exploit on this system was one we were also unable to find the CVE number for. It is found on port 5432, which seems to be a very vulnerable port on the web server. All right, so now we're going to move forward to exploiting 2 of those found vulnerabilities. Remember the 1st and the 5th vulnerabilities listed above. So with the VSFTPD version 2.3.4 backdoor, we're going to find our exploit in the MSF console using the search command. shown here in this image. Not shown in our imagery was making sure our hosts are set to the target IP, which is the web server in this time. Kind of continued. I didn't have enough room on the previous screen, but this is the same exploit. Our options are set. So here in our imagery, you can see we are running the command and we find a shell successfully with a command session opened. We ask, who am I, to establish that we have successfully identified that we have our root. All right, and so the fifth vulnerability, we are now going to exploit that Diffie-Hellman vulnerability. In the top image, you can see in the MSF console, we are searching for Postgres SQL exploits, and we choose to use number 11. Checking our options. Checking our options here, we are setting up our hosts correctly to the web server's IP. And then we run that and make a successful connection. That successful connection opens a Meterpreter console for us, and to establish what our level of privilege is and if it's successful, we ask for the sysinfo command run, and it shows us the computer is the web server.local domain. Continuing the Diffie-Hellman exploit, we actually use the shell command in Meterpreter to open a shell console within the Meterpreter console. And you can see in this image, we establish a new user with root privileges using user add --ou 0 --g 0. We establish a username of test user 1, and then using the password test user 1 command, we set up an easy password of 1. And then bringing into this picture is the actual web server machine, and we show that we have successfully created a root access backdoor user by logging in with our newly created test user 1 account. We ask it, who am I? And it says we are root. Within that same vulnerability exploit, and within the shell we established within Meterpreter, we ask it within the shell as well to show who am I? We are root, as seen in this image. And then we start checking out what files we can explore. I chose to look into the Jasper directory, and within that we found a file called candidate list. And when we display the info of candidate list, we actually find a warning at the beginning of the file letting us know that only the CEO should be able to use this file. We are not the CEO, so this is very dangerous information. Oh, sorry. And as you can see, it is at least 3 people's full information on not only their address, but their date of birth and their social security numbers. Very, very, very highly sensitive information available to any attacker through this vulnerability. All right. Now that I've shown you the vulnerabilities through enumeration, and we've exploited a few of them to show just how vulnerable they are, my recommendations, all the TCP ports are currently open and accessible on both systems. So first things first, I would recommend going in and making sure to close any and every unnecessary port for either server as a first step. Next steps, I would take the issues we've outlined here, the vulnerabilities we've outlined, and patch those identified issues. And then in the final steps, I would look into strengthening the firewall or the router firewall, as it's named in the system, to prevent any further breaches of security. And now, if you'll follow me, we are going to exploit a vulnerability live. We are in the Kali trusted system. We've already opened a terminal, and we've already set up and established a connection to Metasploit. I would like to show you the exploit on the production server for the RMI registry exploit. So we will use the search. I'm going to search RMI registry. Okay, we haven't been given too many to choose from. I am going to select this one because of its excellent rank. So then we will use 3. All right, so let's check the options. We need to set the R host, so we will set our host to the desired target IP, which is 192.168.0.18. We'll verify that. Our hosts have been set. Our L host is set to the current IP address. That's great. So now we will run. Awesome. So we've had a successful connection made. We have an interpreter console open. Let's run sysinfo. Awesome. We've connected to Metasploitable, or the new production server. Let's open a shell. Excellent. So let's see, who am I? I am root. We've successfully gained root access again in the system. We can list all our accessible files and CD into any interesting one we want. Let's try that while we're here. Let's go into the home folder. All right, so in the home folder, let's show, as we did on our slide, we will go into the MSF admin account or directory. Let's check out stuff again, as I know there's sensitive info in there. All right, here's those safe combinations again. Let's use cat to show the file contents. That's not how you spell that word. All right, and again, we are displaying sensitive information easily with our root access. All right, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.